All right, so there's something that I've learned the last tournament that I fished, and that's swimming a worm. So the conditions were, I believe it was like 78 degrees, bluebird skies, a little bit chop on the water, not so much, very muddy, about 1 foot visibility to 2 feet, and the fishing was tough, but I didn't know what to do. So I kind of just picked up the Ned rig because it has been working. I would get 1 to 3 bites a day if I worked really hard, and then I get most of my bites later on in the afternoon. There'd be parts of the time that I'd catch them like early on in the morning on harsh structure, maybe very shallow up, but I found that my bigger fish came off of deeper water and harder structure. Well, mid-level. I wouldn't say deep, I wouldn't say shallow, probably in that 10 foot to 15 foot range. But I found out one key element or one key technique that worked during the tournament, and that was swimming a Ned rig. At first, I was throwing it towards pilings and hard cover in shallow water with an 1/8 ounce owner blockhead, but I felt like that was too slow, but actually too fast, if that makes any sense. So I was catching a lot of smaller fish doing that. I would cast up in 2 feet to 3 feet of water, and I just let it free fall on the bottom, and then I would just pop, let it free fall, pop, let it free fall. But that wasn't working when we had 25 to 35 boats on the water on a small pond. So I think the bass know when it's the weekend. Pretty smart critters, and they know what the different sounds are compared to a weekday and weekend. So I decided to throw the Ned rig on my spin rod. I had an 8 or 10 pound test on it, fluorocarbon, with a backing of 20-pound braid. And the bait I used was Yamamoto Cinco in green pumpkin, copper, and purple flake. And I would trim that Cinco down. I would trim it from the head all the way to the egg sac. So that would take off like an inch and a half of the 5-inch Cinco. So it would make it like 3.5 inch to 4 inch. So I wasn't using the 2.75 TRD Ned rig worm, but I did use that 3 days prior to the tournament, and they did get bites, but there were a lot of smaller fish, smaller bass. So I upgraded to that 3.5, 4-inch Cinco that was trimmed down from 5 inches, and that seemed to work. And that little quiver on that little Cinco seemed to attract some fish. But what I would do is I would sit my boat in 2 different ways. I would either sit in 8 feet of water and cast at 12 feet, and I would just work it uphill along pilings and a dock. Or I would go to a main lake point, sit in about 15 to 20 feet of water, cast up to 8, and then drag it. Well, not drag it, but swim it. So my specific technique, what I would do is I would cast it out, let it hit the bottom, and then I would slowly reel. Every time I feel a bump on the cover that I was fishing, whether it was grass, pilings, or rocks, I'd just do this little pop against it. And then I would pause a little bit, and then I would go back to retrieving. Then I would run into grass, rocks, or a piling, and I would pop. And then I would pause it, and then I would retrieve again. And that was a great thing about capturing everything on the GoPro, is that I know exactly what I was doing. A lot of the times when you go back home, you think, oh yeah, I did this, I did that. But you look back on the videotape and you're just like, oh, I was swimming it, then I popped it, and then I paused, and then I swimmed it, and I popped it and paused. So actually looking at the video, now I know what to do on these feature tournaments when the fishing is tough. Is that I could just slowly creep it on the bottom, give it a little pop every time I see a little cover, pause the bait, and then do that over and over again. The biggest takeaway from this technique would be you can swim anything. You could take a worm, put it on a shaky head, a Ned rig, a Texas rig, and you can literally slow retrieve it, almost like a crankbait. Or not a crankbait. I would say the best example would be a Huddleston Roth 12, fishing it over at Shag Rock over at Clear Lake and just slow rolling it, bumping every single rock. And when you come across a big boulder, you just pop it up and over, then you let it pause, and then you continue slow rolling it. So it's almost like acting like a swim bait, but you're going from an 8-inch swim bait or 10-inch swim bait all the way down to 3.5 to 4-inch little Senko worm. And I imagine you can do this with a lot of baits. I wish I tried a creature bait on a rugby head or free swinging head that VMC makes, but I didn't try that out during the tournament, but I wish I had, because I think that would work. Throwing that rugby head out there with a sweet beaver or some sort of creature bait and just slowly winding in, pop, pop, right when I hit a rock or some soft cover. And that would just cause, a reaction bite. It would just, they see it swimming, they follow it. As soon as it hits cover and I pop, and I pause, that's when the strikes were happening. Kind of makes sense because I didn't feel any bites. All I would feel is pop, line would go slack, and then I would lift up my rod to go swim it again, and I would feel weight, and then I would drop my rod down for 2 seconds, and then set the hook. Because a lot of those times, the fish like to bite the little tail, especially the small ones. So you want to give them a little bit of time to chomp that bait down. One fish really liked it swimming, that it gobbled it down its gullet. So I had to reverse unhook them with some pliers. But that's the biggest takeaway. I would be lying if I told you like you should swim this bait, you should swim that bait, because honestly, I only try this technique with a swim bait. And I tried this technique with a drop shot rigged with a swim bait as well, with the Kitech 2.8, and then this Ned rig. If I'm using a Ned rig, fishing has to be usually slower, and I'll be slow rolling it, almost like pre-spawn bass with a Huddleston or an Osprey. I don't even know if Osprey makes swim baits anymore, but that was back in 2007, 2008. But yeah, try that out, see if it works. If your pond or lake is really struggling, throw on that Ned rig. I would throw an 1/8 ounce to a 1/16 ounce, and I would just slow roll it if you're fishing really shallow with grass. If you're fishing deep, I would throw 3/8 of an ounce with a weed guard, depending on what you're fishing in deep. If it's a brush pile, if it's rock piles, I can get really snagged. I would use a weed guard for it. My number one recommended hook wouldn't be the original Ned rig hook. It would be the Owner Blockhead offset worm hook, because you could Texas rig it and basically drag it wherever you want. It's great. It's a great hook. And as far as lines, if there's a lot of grass or a lot of riprap that you're fishing, I would shoot towards 12-pound test. If there's not a lot of things going on where you could lose a fish, I would drop down maybe 8, but the middle ground for me would be 10-pound tests. And shoot, I use Red Label for 10-pound test. If I'm going below 10-pound test, I'll probably use FC Sniper 8-pound test fluorocarbon. But yeah, give that a shot. All you need is a 7-foot rod. Spend no more than $60 on the rod, spend no more than $60 on the reel. Shoot, you can come with a combo, $120 combo that's legit nowadays, and just fish that setup, and they'll take care of you for when fishing's real good and fishing's real slow. Ned rig works, I believe, all season long. It's almost like a jig, but catches more small fish as well as big fish. I think the jig catches small fish too, but I think your odds go up a lot better of catching a bigger fish on a jig. I mean, there was days I went out to Lake Paris, local lake in California, Southern California to be specific, and I'll be like casting out to trees. I'll be getting no bites, and then all of a sudden I get 18-inch, 18-inch was like a 3.5-pound bass, all the way up to like a 6-pounder. 22-inch bass. So anyways, let's not get off the topic here, but if you pick up a 5-inch Senko, I like to keep it simple. Go green pumpkin, watermelon if it's super clear, some sort of flake. Let's say if it's during the summer and the bluegill are already spawned out and they're just roaming the shallows, go copper, purple flake, maybe even green flake. depending what your bluegills look like. If you guys don't have any bluegill, which I highly doubt, stick with the, just a normal green pumpkin, black flake Senko. It won't hurt. And cut that into 3.5, 4 inches right at the egg sac. Make sure you leave that skinny little tail on. Texas rig it to your owner blockhead hook. If you're gonna have one hook, I would probably use the 1/8 ounce owner blockhead hook. Make sure it's the offset one. And put on some 8-pound tests, or not 8-pound, put on some 10, 12-pound tests, fluorocarbon, and take that $60 reel, $60 rod combo that you have. I would say like a medium heavy rod. You might be able to get away with a medium rod. And then just make sure your drag set up perfectly. Cast that thing out and then just literally like slow retrieve it slowly. And then every time you come across cover, just pop, pop, pause, and then reel it, go back to reeling it, almost like a Roth 12 Huddleston bait. Just creep it on the bottom. It might save your day. There might be 5 minutes left in the tournament and you have last cast going on, and if you use that technique, it might really help you out. That's what happened to me. I caught my 3rd fish of the day. There was I don't think there was a limit this past tournament. There was 29 anglers, 27 people caught fish. Extremely small pond, so if you caught anything more than 3 fish, you were in the top 3. So take this technique. If you like this video, and if you think if this content was really helpful to you, then like this video, subscribe, hit the alert button. I'm trying something new by just teaching you what I know from tournaments that I fish and real world situations, and I just want to continue to share this with you guys, and hope you enjoyed this video. Please turn on that alert button and comment if you have any more questions about the specific rig. Anyways, have a good night. Peace.